We have a quorum and it's 6 o'clock, so let's start the meeting.
Certainly. Dan Kaiser,
Here?
Rick Marshall,
Here.
Michael Rossman,
Here.
Roger Coleman,
Here.
Russell Johnson,
Here.
Derek Carmen,
Here.
and Brandon Dross is absent excused.
Okay, let's rise and give the Pledge of Allegiance. Next item on our agenda is public comments do we have anybody sign up? I don't see anybody in the audience.
We didn't receive any signups for public comment tonight.
Which all's, commissioners, have you had a chance to review the meeting minutes? Yes. Any comments?
I move approval.
Okay. Right. Second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Just to clarify, who is the second on that one? Carmen, thank you.
okay, next item on the agenda is the police report. I know he stepped out.
Yeah, Sergeant Hagan is on a case, so he won't be joining us
Okay,
tonight. He did come in, he didn't have anything specific to present in the police report tonight, so if there's any
Great.
questions, they can be forwarded to him and we can address those then.
Although Officer Hagan did mention here, for those of you who maybe didn't hear him, that they were doing a cell phone look-see, and he played the role of a construction worker down there. And he said it was just nonstop seeing people on their cell phones. So, kind of interesting.
okay, next item on the agenda is the engineering with the active issues log.
Made some adjustments over time, and in putting together this agenda and the active issues log, we've got the color coding in with a variety of issues, trying to capture the highlights of things that we're presenting here. And that pink color that we have are the ones that we have been working with the city manager and the city engineer to get moved forward, that need some traffic counts or studies or things to be associated with that. So we are doing that. And I'll point out the other scenarios are the ones that are left within this are the ODOT related items. I have been having correspondence with ODOT representatives that they're planning to attend the July meeting and work out an agenda items and things with the chair on that. But what they're looking to do is present how they evaluate and prioritize traffic safety concerns within Newburgh and elsewhere. So it's kind of the general topic of their presentation is intended to be. And a new one that has come up that's on that list is the North Main and Oregon 219, 240, excuse me. And that's with the North Main and North Street sort of where they cross. There's a whole region area to like so many areas that we have where they're missing. There's uncontrolled intersections, sidewalks, pedestrian crossing, things like that. So it's a typical common theme that we have kind of coming within the active issues log. So that's just another one that is a newer one on the item there that's out there. The other thing I identified is we put the color coding in the comments, and then whenever I create the sheets to show all of this, it creates a number of pages within the document. So my next step that I'll be doing, making adjustments with this, is the different categories, the ones that have dropped off on what we show on the agenda, but yet is available in the total active issues log, are the things that have been completed, resolved in years past, no further action, either from not enough information to move it forward or a decision not to move for a variety of reasons. Those items will go onto a different tab within the spreadsheet so that we can kind of keep the color coding to the items that show up on the page and reduce the number of pages and lists to be looking through there all in general. But we are making progress moving through getting the steps in place to start knocking off some of these things that have been outstanding for quite a bit of time. It looks like there's about 20 plus items that exist and that we're working through to knock those out. And they're kind of getting into categories as we're looking to knock these out. Was there a question? Sure.
Yes, thank you. So just a comment. I think the issue may be one of printing. It's, at least on my copy, it's printing the header, which is taking 2/3 of the page every time.
That's what I'm getting. Yeah.
So if that was, I see. So
Yeah, I was
Just
just trying to
not
keep the
putting
color
it-
coding to match
I've got
up
it
with
once.
this, but then not of it's all
Okay.
applicable to the items on the page. So yeah, it was a way of addressing that printing issue. Correct.
And the listing, it is in chronological order, but the most recent is the last?
The most recent is last. Yes.
Okay.
And what has happened with this, I noticed this going through, is I've been trying to track things in chronologically, but then also they're grouped into certain locations that are similar to kind of tie them together. So it's not a true chronological order type of a thing.
Would there be a way to highlight additions to the list from last time or?
So I attempted to do that with the initial pieces with kind of in this color coding, the heading component of it with the items in red to kind of give the bigger picture of things and those new additions. The individual new items did not do that with this one, but that's something I can work towards to doing as well. So that's kind of the way the format of the item was going to go. And in working through these items, I kind of came up that the majority of them are related to pedestrian crossing. There's about 10 out of the 20 or so active things to be looking at. The next things are stop sign requests and speeding, and then parking is fourth, is like about 4 of them there. So that's the least amount of ones to be dealing with there on that aspect of things. And so the course of last year, kind of working through, as we talked about, there's not been a lot of the resources to be able to move forward with a lot of these things. So I've been working with the city manager and our consultant city engineer to kind of take steps to move that forward. So the city engineer has right at this stage is working within the city engineer's budget to utilize staff of Keller, transportation staff, to kind of start to look at kind of knocking these things off between now and July. And then July 1, we do have some dollars in the budget for doing these items and things. I don't have a specific number at the moment. I need to get confirmation from the city manager on that. The draft budget has just come out. There is dollars that were in there. I do know that what I was asking for, the amount did not get fully included there. So I just going to get clarification on just what we do have for studies. But the city engineer has committed to utilizing within basically his budget for his allotted time to tackle some of these, at least get things in place and start and move those forward as they can within that. And they'll be monitoring that on a month-to-month basis type of thing. So things won't move quickly, but they will be moving in comparison to what it has been. So that's the intent of moving that forward. Another question?
Yeah, one of the questions that we had at the last meeting was about how are these prioritized? How do we even know, like what
So-
one should be worked on first?
Right.
You have different categories. I don't, so I was thinking that maybe we could have a weighting of a way of, like, if it's, you get like points, depending on like danger, right? If there's been an accident, that would
Yeah.
that would be a point.
Yeah.
If it's or almost an accident, that would be, that might get a point. And if multiple people are asking about it, maybe that adds another point in order to get these issues up
Gotcha.
that have either the most visits should have, they're very visible, and whether there is a pedestrian danger or a driver danger kind of thing.
So just so I can point out, it might be kind of a two-step kind of approach to this, but what we have done for the work plan we created with Keller to move forward with these is kind of using, and that's kind of what's stated in the line work there under that, or in the statements there, is what we did is looked at how long an issue has been on the item, how frequently it gets reported, and then some engineering judgment as far as what order of things, what is in kind of after an initial windshield survey that I typically will try to do when these things first come in, as soon as I possibly can. Sometimes it's the end of my lunch or the beginning of my lunch that I do set, or the end of the day or beginning of the day, depending on what's going on, and try to analyze and see, is there something there that's readily and obviously an issue, or is it something more complicated? And trying to balance those together to set the prioritization for, this is, in this prioritization is for taking that look and doing where the things where studies are needed, so that we're looking at getting that study started and getting and identifying what are the true issues, because sometimes there's an observation of one issue and then some, and actually looking at it in closer, other things can be identified. I mean, sometimes a item is identified as there's somebody, speeding, and somebody, was crossing a crosswalk and almost getting hit, type of a scenario is a common thing. And then sometimes whenever we visit the site, there's some tree blockage, or there's some visibility issue that's creating something there, that's something that can be dealt with. Sometimes there's a speed limit sign that's covered up by a tree. There's could be a number of other things going on. Similarly, it's kind of an Fernwood and Brucher is one of these, is there's a concern with the pedestrian crossing there. There's also, it's an uncontrolled lake of an intersection where the crossing would go. Does it need to be a three-way stop instead of, so is there a stop sign? Even though that's not the request that's been made, that's the type of thing that can kind of come out of the analysis and the study and identifying the issues and constraints. And we can use that as a tie-in into with this, what Keller has been working on is the first thing that we've gotten approval for them to move forward with. And the city manager just signed off on them moving forward with that as well. Under the budget constraints that I talked about earlier, is, we can advance to the next slide, is taking a look at basically identifying the issues that are there, the various constraints, going with the observations that have been come in, but then also taking that engineering judgment and applying that to other things that would factor into whatever type of an improvement would go. And one of the things to point out, or that is an observation that I had over the years as this has come up, is that where the crosswalk would go, typically where people walk, goes across almost diagonally to get to the trail on the south side on the golf course property. But yet the intersection is skewed off to the west from there. So then where the crosswalk would typically go would be perpendicular for crossing, limiting the amount of distance with there. You get to an area where there is not sidewalk. Not only is there not sidewalk, there's the city limits are there. The property is owned by ODOT for the future bypass, for future right of way for the future bypass phase 2B. So there's complications there, and I can only speculate that this issue has not been addressed in part because of the idea that if improvements are made here, they're going to go away with the future bypass. So that's got to be something to be factored into all of that. Yeah, it has a potential to be, but again, that's speculation.
That,
Yes.
So that portion of the bypass, whether you like it or not, the idea, it's not funded, and there's no plans for it to be funded. So I would just caution about making that a reason not to do.
And that's
something.
why we are moving this one forward, as to kind of, let's do the study, let's confirm all the issues and constraints and come out with some engineered recommendations out of this of what would be warranted and resolves things here. So that's the idea behind this. And this is what I wanted to, and I showed you the scope of work that they presented for this so that you have an idea of this is what we'll be doing as we move these forward. And we've kind of, like, for the other ones that we've identified in the, we had worked out kind of a rough prioritization that we're intending to follow, but it'll be a fluid items as things get added, as we get concerns and observations presented to us. We'll put it in the active issues log. So it'll be a fluid item of so where things shift and move based upon how long they've been on there, how frequently it comes up. And then kind of to your point about if there's a true danger that's been identified, if there's been a crash, if there's an injury or anything like that, those obviously elevate the things up to be looked at closer in greater detail. And a few of those that have come in similar or kind of related to that, just as an example, there's a couple items that have dropped off. They came on the active issues log and they dropped off fairly quickly. One of them was, it was a bit ago, but it was at 9th and Meridian, where someone had reported that there was a child that had been hit by a vehicle, but it wasn't clear. There wasn't a report made to I could never confirm if there had been a police report or what had happened. But we immediately went out and looked at the situation, identified that there was cars parking within the 20 feet of a marked crosswalk. We also saw where there was already some curb painting that was there that had faded. Maintenance went out and within days, maintenance got out and got signs in place, some temporary ones and then some future. So that issue got resolved. So that's kind of when there is something that's of an obvious documented safety concern, we try to get those knocked out as quickly as possible. Especially where there's things like that are kind of over, that there's the evidence of a decision has been made before to address the items and we just move those forward.
A couple comments. One, I think the plans, ODOT's plans are that there'll be an overpass in that area, so it will not be affecting this particular intersection.
Yeah, I'm not sure on what the current plans on that. I know there had been discussions in the past that it would be depressed going through this area, but
When they did their value engineering, they decided it was easier, and
Okay,
cheaper to
well,
go
that's-
overhead
Oh.
rather than underground.
okay, well, that's kind of one of the things that things evolve and change with time. So yeah, I
And the-
appreciate that information.
The second thing is that this one, I was been talking to the city manager about this particular issue because it's been on the list for a long time. I'm also on an advisory committee for the Highland Parks and Recreation District. And you look at that, and one of the issues here is because of where the Park and Rec District trail ends and begins. And so I'm thinking this ought to be a joint project between CPRD and the city. And so we started bringing the parties together. And so actually we have a meeting tomorrow with CPRD and the city to take a look at this issue. And it's great to have this criteria to kind of look at what issues we might be needing to look at. And I think there's some creative options that we might be able to look at there too. But I can see that, again, this is a issue for CPRD also. So maybe there's some joint potential funding on this thing.
Well, I
So
appreciate
maybe
you
they can,
sharing that.
maybe even they might want to move that or try and adjust the beginning of the trail according to where it's safest to cross.
Exactly. Yes.
I have a question or two. So if we use, this is great to have a sort of specific case, and some very definite issues and so on, but can we sort of generalize using this example so they might follow this approach to other locations as they work their way through the list? My first question is, forgive me, a really dumb question, but are these folks really coming here from Idaho to do this?
No. So the transportation engineer that is putting this together is in their Idaho office with Keller. Keller has offices scattered throughout the country. So there is actually a gentleman that lives in Newburgh or nearby. There's going to be the eyes and ears to
Okay.
kind of be able to be locally to go take a look at things. And then their main office is in Salem.
So they can do some field work
they can
without a many hours road trip.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. I should have made that clear.
Well, it's
with
right
that
there on
piece
the
of-
letterhead.
It is
I'm
with it,
just
yes.
like,
Yep.
oh.
Yep.
Okay, when they launch their review of a particular location, do they have any way to work with the police department or you to get the collision history? Is that information stored in a way that can be,
That's gonna be
reported?
something, yeah, the police department has crash history and elements that we can get from, and I will be getting that information and coordinating on how
Okay.
best to get that to
so
them.
that,
type of a
that
thing.
data exists and can be
Yeah.
searched?
And
Okay.
what we typically will do with those scenarios is we'll typically pull from what's available on ODOT, which they give the last 5 years, and it's usually 2 years behind.
Yeah.
What we'll usually do is go ahead and ask PD for information that they have, basically the raw crash data that
For
that
the
feeds
2
into the
years.
ODOT
Yeah.
elements so that we have more local and more recent information to actually also look at as well. So that's what's been done in previous ones in the past, and that's what I intend to do going
Just
forward.
this is kind of my formerly professional, now just personal amateur opinion. On their work plan, my opinion, it would be best to do the site visit first before starting the process of collecting counts and so on. Because something may reveal itself as, you know, this is an obvious solution and let's just do it.
Yeah.
So that, and again, that's more general than this specific
Yes.
location.
You know, and I would anticipate the same thing. I've had conversations with them kind of to that effect, is to kind of, this particular one has enough complications and
Oh,
things
sure.
that there's the issues are there, but there's some of the others that are gonna be much simpler.
Yeah.
And if I could carve out the 5 hours in a week to knock it out, I probably would do so. And that's gonna be some of the, this one's is a more complicated one, it's gonna have a higher price tag to it.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones are gonna be much simpler, and they'll just be a matter of, once they look at it and spend the conversations to date, have been that it might be just a few hours type of a thing to identify and basically create a, here's what the issues are, here's the warrant, it's warranted, it's not warranted. That
Yeah.
are not warranted, are not as complicated as missing sidewalks and other issues going on, or missing ADA ramps where it comes to the pedestrian crossing scenarios.
I took a look at this location because I wasn't very familiar with it, and you know, what seems so obvious to me, I now understand is not. It's like, well, just make a little connection from the trail over to the corner. But it's like, there's other people's property and there's the city limits, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
I get it
Yeah,
now.
no, and I wasn't even, until I was kind of doing a little more research for this to kind of help guide, to set the priorities of what we were looking at. And then came across that this property was outside of the city limits was the first thing.
Yeah.
And I'll just share that there is a provision within the code. It's not been enforced very often, other than through when permits are required for a property, is to where property owners are responsible for their sidewalks. And if there's not one that's there to install the sidewalk, they can be directed to do so.
Does
it
that
doesn't
apply
happen.
to county property?
It does
running on a
not,
city
it
street?
does not, because
didn't
it
think
only
so.
applies to
Yeah.
to properties inside the city. So that isn't even an option in this case to pursue.
Yeah,
And that's the only reason I share that, is because there's other locations where that might be an option,
Yeah.
provided that there's a right set of circumstances to go down that path.
thank you. I have questions that are more general to the rest of the log than this location, so I'll pause in case there's more to say about this. Okay.
Thanks. So, all right,
Pardon?
go ahead.
So, I had various thoughts as I slogged through the log. One of the things that came up when I had the privilege of visiting that city council is, do we have a way that we connect back with the people who report these things? Is that standard practice that, you know, once it's been entered in the log and there's an initial, some sort of response, we close the loop and they hear back from the city?
Yeah, so what
Okay.
typically happens is that whenever the issue comes in, there'll be a response back that's been logged. Basically, it's been, we've acknowledged, we've got it, it's going into the active issues log to be the ones to be investigated.
Yeah.
And typically that'll sit there until we get to the stage like the Fernwood and Bircher ones. Now that we've got that going forward, I'll be sending an email tracking down the information for the people to get the information back and let them know that that's being
Oh,
looked at moving
so
forward.
you're gonna reconnect with those people?
Wherever I
again?
can,
Good.
I make that attempt to do that. And then whenever there's a decision, if there's a decision issued either to go forward or something's been found to be not warranted, I try to get that feedback as well.
I got a question though. During that city council meeting, I think one of the councilors indicated that they had submitted an item and they had not received anything.
That's why I had it on my
Yeah.
list, yeah.
So what I have learned is that we have what is called the C-click fix, is an item where things can be sent into. And apparently there were a number of those sitting in there for a lengthy period of time not being assigned. And at the time I did not have a login to that. So not very long ago, I was getting access to that and I got in and dealt with a number of those that
Did
were
the
in there.
stuff stored come through?
Was able to locate them
Okay,
and got responses back. One of them that came in that way was the North Main Highway
Oh.
240 at North Street was in
Yeah.
there, and it had been in there for some time, so they'd gotten back to, so that was posted back into that system.
okay.
So yeah, that's something I'm now aware to be aware, to be aware of it and watching that. And I will say that a lot of those that had been in there, and I'm not sure about the particular one that was referenced from the city councilman that had submitted something, but a lot of the ones that I found that were in there had already been on, had been added to they came in before my time as a liaison. They had been added in the active issues log and they had moved through the process. They just hadn't been closed out in the C-Click Fix program
Okay.
itself. So
Okay.
I'm assuming that that's a number of those is what those are from. That's the ones that I'm aware of.
That sounds like it'll address the concern.
Yeah.
Another observation I had is that quite a few of the things listed have to do with intersections that are currently uncontrolled in the grid area of Old Town. And in my view of the world, that's a very routine thing, that in a small town grid system, you don't put a stop sign on 2 or 4 legs of every single intersection. Uncontrolled intersections are routine, and there's rules in the, I want to call it the vehicle code because that's where I came from. That, everybody with a driver's license in theory knows the rules, but clearly some people need reminding. And I think that could go on our list of possible educational topics. I know that Mina mentioned in our agenda tonight. That, here's how grid system works. And oh, by the way, you're supposed to slow down for an uncontrolled intersection. And, so that opportunity popped out at me. Another topic that I think really popped up again and again was a lot of these entries are things that potentially point at an evaluation for a traffic calming response. People concerned about speeding on long straightaway streets. I was especially disheartened to see that people are already complaining about the speed in the brand new neighborhood behind, my reference is behind Jersey Mike's. Where I mean, brand new, and people are driving too fast. It's like, if we had those rules about, or those guidelines, let's just say guidelines about incorporating traffic calming into the design of new development, we could have prevented that and not had it become a problem that we now have to solve with traffic engineering retrofits. So just an ad for my cause.
I appreciate that. I can add one kind of additional follow-up related to, I believe that's the Jory Street and I'm drawing a blank on the other name in the Crestview Crossing subdivision. The Crestview Green subdivision is going in currently. And when I talked to the person that had made that observation and complaint, it was the construction traffic.
Oh,
That was doing the speeding, the
Not the
trucks and things,
neighbors.
not necessarily the neighbors.
that's
So
encouraging at
our
least.
inspectors had a conversation with the contractor and the general and worked through to get that to be resolved. It hasn't eliminated it completely because there's always new employees and new things on there, but that was a big part of what that was. Again, that's kind of getting the additional information of what's truly going on that we would try to feed into this information.
But it still sounds like a great advertisement for, we
Oh.
could have built these streets in a way that would be a lot less speedable.
I didn't mean to lessen your point there by any means.
Yes,
That was the
more cost effective.
burden of my career, yes.
Perception is it's bad for business, but, it's, the problem stays.
It's good for business because we're building neighborhoods that people will like better.
That's right. Property values will go up.
I think so.
Question about that. So if we had if the city council had adopted a traffic calming policy, would that have, in the future at least, provide the guidance to the city traffic engineers when developing a new neighborhood?
My vision of it was that there would be some sort of incentive that if you build in certain features to make the street more livable, you get, my original proposal was you can increase the number of units, you know, the density of the development. That used to be a thing that really motivated people where I came from. The subcommittee we had didn't look too favorably on that, but they said that the incentive that would work here would be credit against the fees, the system charges or whatever. So, you know, some sort of incentive rather than just a stick, there'd be a carrot. And, you know, you get points for the more different treatments you applied in the design and just built in, you know, curb extensions and, you know, whoop-de-doos and so forth to keep people from speeding through these brand new places before they've even moved in.
Yeah, I'd like maybe something that city councils should be looking at, any of these developments, because the construction also, they trash the streets. The trucks come through, they destroy the pavement. They should be paying for that. You know, all that work that was done, next to George Fox for Friends, the new Friends place, that road is destroyed now. It's full of potholes and rough because all those trucks came through there. And I'm like, well, they should have been charged for that. You know, if you want to build something, you're gonna have to fix the streets around there. You know, the same thing was when they first built the subdivision beyond Jakewood Park, over toward the new school and the senior center, all that area. You know, it could have like another 2 blocks they could have paved. Instead it's country road and then nice road again. It's like, what, just like that would be, it's like fix the entrance into your development, you know, add a little more to that, because again, that was also damage from the construction that went through there.
Like, Counselor.
Thank you for your comments. It's something that I'll talk to Russ and Will about. I mean, I don't know how you enforce something like that. The roads are for public use and I understand what you're saying. But you know, maybe Russ has some idea about how old the streets are and what, you know, what upgrades needed to be done. I don't know exactly how you would go about doing that, but I'm certainly happy to talk to Russ and Will about it.
Brett, is that one of those issues where the development code doesn't have enough teeth in it? Doesn't give staff enough?
It's a little bit. So how those situations are typically addressed, if the road is newer and there's a construction project going on, then what there is are the engineering inspectors will go out and evaluate the road where the trucks are going to be at in advance. And before the project, during and after, to see if there's a way to document the damage has occurred, and also trying to identify who caused the damage. When there's construction nearby, the typical thing is that contractor that caused the damage. Not always can that be proven though. There's some challenges within that type of a thing. So there's been situations that have occurred where it's been proven that there was a damage done to a curb, say in an area, and it went back to what contractor had been involved with that, and that was charged back to them.
I know pavement design standards changed probably like 20, 30 years ago to where everybody beefed up their pavement sections in a recognition that trucks are causing more damage to the pavement than, you know, first thought years and years ago. Is that part of the problem here, is we might have older streets built to an earlier standard that's, you know, not our current modern standard? We might call for a thicker pavement section.
Yeah, I can't speak to what the design standards were particularly, but we do have older sections of road that we have the transportation utility fee program is kind of the pavement preservation to kind of bring roads up. And we have a number of roads that are not in the best condition. It's challenging when those roads are already that way, then bill, then what is the bill and what does that amounts to? So yeah, I think having continued conversations in that regard is only positive.
Yeah, because I mean, to me, the people who are building it and using it are making money. And so in order for us to allow them to make that money, they should kick some money back to fix anything that they damaged, or more incentives. I mean, I know other cities have done things like, oh, you want to build, you know, a big store somewhere, you're gonna have to put a park in somewhere. You know, you're gonna have to build apartment houses as well. You're gonna take out this area. So those kind of things is like some part of the fee structure or something is like, You're gonna be responsible for the surrounding area in order to come in and make your money.
Question. So we have an upcoming in another year or two, a full long-term planning review for traffic flow. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name.
TSP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the transportation system plan update,
The transportation system
there-
plan update.
there's,
Does that include to Russ, I'm building on your point here. The code guidelines for enhancements that must be followed by developers? Because I'm sure the traffic engineers, they have to follow some very specific code. They just can't say, well, I think the developer ought to be doing some things down the street here. It's gotta follow specific guidelines. So are those guidelines on the table for review in that plan?
well, currently, I understand the city's pursuing a grant, a TGM grant through ODOT for the transportation system plan update for 27-29. And with that, there will be a scoping scenario with that. So that during that time is when those kind of, what the scope of that might look like would be identified. You're later in our agenda items, there's the review of your traffic, of your work plan and items. There's always the opportunity for the Traffic Safety Commission to present recommendations to council for a variety of things. That is something that probably could be included in that piece of it, so.
It appears that the current city council though has been concerned about costs and has basically said no to almost anything that has an increased cost. And one of the problems we see is, as you see in this article that was in the paper, our streets are deteriorating significantly due to lack of maintenance. The traffic calming issue that we talked about is another issue that it's really affecting the livability in Newburgh. And you can't just keep saying no. You've got to maintain, and you've got to, or else you won't have a city. You won't have an infrastructure. So just a comment to the council. You know, you got to stop just saying no.
I don't think that,
Like Counselor.
I don't think that no has been the answer. I think that they're trying to prioritize where they're gonna focus. And right now, the focus is, one of the council goals is to work on districts 1 and 3. And I wish I had that email here in front of me, but recently Will talked about that, how you're going to maintain these streets using slurry and I forget what the other word was, just to do like surface fixing. And then the other streets that require the grinding and inlay. It's and there's not a lot of tough money. And the revenue from the gas tax is not where it should be. There's a lot of things that are going along with fixing these roads, including prioritizing these things. It's not a no. It's just what makes the most sense, I think our staff is trying to figure out.
So
Brett has light on.
okay,
I was just gonna say, I just want to make sure we're focusing on this. We're talking on with the active issues log and questions associated with that. There's the later in the agenda and your visit, the review of your work plan for a number of these other discussions. So.
so I have a couple more questions on the active issues log. I appreciate the logistical challenge of the header with the color codes. And yet I still find myself wondering, what does it mean when there's no color?
Yeah, so the no color really is just, those are new items where I'm kind of lacking information to be able to move forward or to say, okay, this is ready to be moving over into that we need the counts or studies. There's one of those is, there was a concern voiced about parking. I can't even remember the name of the street, but it's like I have not gotten a call back from the person to understand what their concern is. When I drive through the area, didn't see any cars parked along the roadway.
Right.
So obviously it's something occurring at a time when I'm not by there in the mid-afternoon or early evening.
Yeah. And
So
then,
it's those, that's the type of thing that I'll leave on there for like 1 or 2 of these meetings. And if I continue to not get a call back, it'll drop off under and fall in. It won't drop off the list. It'll move into the no further action taken along with the comment about not having a call back.
and speaking of parking, I think that topic of parking too close to the intersection goes on the list of possible educational topics. And-
Rick? Where are you proposing the educational topics would be posted, like on the city website?
Oh, I don't propose to be an expert on how to
Okay.
do that. I'm just saying that I want them on the list.
All right. Fair
And
enough.
on our agenda, it's asked for us to identify issues to publicize. And those are.
Thank you, Rick. Any other comments, Counselor?
Yeah, we have our PIO here in the house. Maybe she has some ideas on how we can do some education.
So I wasn't gonna put you on the spot, Emily, but I guess I am going to now. So related to that is I had come across, there's one of the questions about, I think it was the one related to the area by the airport about all the parking close to the intersections and items. So that I had come across that some years ago, a similar, for not the same person, not the same location specifically, but someone else had identified that same thing. And PD had a parking, I don't even know what the title of it is, Emily. It was like, it basically becomes into parking yes or no. Where's a good place to park and where not to park. A kind of a pamphlet was put together for both Newburgh and Dundee, and it was out on the website. So I approached Emily about getting that updated. Been working with PD to do so. And then kind of what was not done previously, but what we were thinking of is getting it where we could distribute that to. Along with getting on the website. And in the past, I think for the previous time when it had occurred, they had printed up a number of the pamphlets and given to the person that had the issue. And I expect that they probably handed them to people or put them onto cars or whatever. That's my understanding. I'm not certain of how they passed it out to their neighbors, but that's what my understanding is. So we were thinking of different ways to present that out. I don't know if Emily had anything else wanted to.
Yeah, I think the only other ideas that I had were obviously social media pushes, and that's the thing I'm in charge of. And then the other thing is that just based on experience and anecdotal evidence, Newburgh's community responds really well to in-person engagement. So there could always be the opportunity to attend a Newburgh Wednesday market as the city of Newburgh and have information about that. If NDPD is going to schools, they might bring some information about our various traffic law and policies. So things like that would be really great. Obviously, there's logistical organization there, but also thinking through, ODOT does a lot of resources, bilingual resources that target different traffic safety issues. You were talking about traffic law earlier. They have a few different social media campaigns that I've tapped into in the past. The phone issue that Officer Hagan was talking about earlier, various things like that. Just reminding people of those things, especially because as somebody who's a transplant from Wisconsin, some of the traffic law here in Oregon is different. So it's always good to get that reminder and education. So that's something the city of Newburgh can definitely be an asset to, and also working with our local downtown coalition and various other partners to put that information out, our tourism board, those kind of folks. So just a few ideas.
So is that something that you're just doing on an ongoing basis, or do you need our commission to take any action to empower you, or you can just do it?
So some of it is that I just do it because I have my schedule of engagement topics from the National Highway Transit Authority or NDPD will give me stuff. But certainly if there's anything in particular that you guys want to communicate to Brett as sensitive issues that might be time sensitive, if you're getting complaints from people or if there are particular projects that you sort of want public feedback on, those are things that you can definitely talk to Brett about, and he can chat with me and we can boogie on something. Just like the pamphlet that he was mentioning before. Just some of those things, if I don't know about them, I don't know to communicate about them. So, and obviously I'm hearing some feedback from the public myself, so it's always on my mind. traffic potholes, road conditions are things that people deal with every day. So we get a lot of communication about them from folks that live in Newburgh and folks that drive through Newburgh. So
Well, just to summarize, the three topics from tonight so far have been the driving while on your cell phone, the how to handle an uncontrolled intersection, and the parking too close to an intersection. Yes? So go forth and publicize, please.
And I
Just,
add
for-
one-
just a second. Just to clarify though, Brett, would that communication need to run through city manager?
Does not necessarily. I would think that would not necessarily need to, if it's falling in lines with the things that we would be broadcasting out there.
Go ahead, Russell.
I would also add, that you're supposed to signal when exiting a circle. And I don't think anyone knows that. And we have so many circles, and circles seem to be ODOT's solution to everything. So they would be nice to have a sign, at least a sign that said that, signal when exiting, but it is the law in Oregon.
Some time ago that we had put together kind of a how to drive through a roundabout scenario that had been pushed out. That'd probably be something to kind of revisit and bring that up, which it covers all of those things. Yeah.
Russ, I stand educated. Yeah. So I don't signal going into a traffic signal circle. And what does that achieve? Who is that notifying?
Well, I mean, one would be anyone trying to enter the circle would know you're leaving the circle. But it's just the Oregon law that you're supposed to exit. So I looked it up because there's been going through a lot of them lately and going, I wonder what the rules are here.
I'll be sure to correct my spouse.
You know, what I'm hearing is that you guys understand this vehicle code very well, and I'm sure the PD would love to have some volunteer police officers to go out there and do some more traffic enforcement, things like that. If you got some spare time,
Is that something you just contact them about and that, yeah.
sorry, I was making a joke, but yeah, you can contact them about it.
But I just had one other item to add kind of related to the active issues log, and that's kind of just pointing out that our GIS analyst position description got revised so that the analyst will be also collecting some of the counts and speed data, and there's some equipment being purchased in order for us to be able to, staff to be able to do that, collect that, and have a log and keeping it within our GIS.
Store the
And
data.
store the
once it's
data
collected.
so that we have it exactly. That's kind of the idea behind that, so it'll be available going forward. And so we'll be working with Keller to accomplish that. So, yeah, small steps, but steps are being taken to work through all of these items. So, and that's what I've had on that.
Brett, that's the map we see here. That's the active issues map.
Yes,
For
I
the
just
GIS
wanted to
department?
point out also, that's the other, our GIS analyst actually put together the map that you see in the PDF that's in the agenda. Was not able to get it to fit onto the PowerPoint presentation, but that PDF will probably include those going forward with this active issues log as a ability to kind of give a picture where these are at. There is also the online Traffic Safety Commission map that we have. These same issues show up there as well on that map that's available to the public to see as well. And if you are on that online map and go in and click on where the icons are, it'll give you the issue number that's on the log. It doesn't go in the basic description. It doesn't provide all the other comments and things, but it just identifies what the observed issue is at that location. And I believe it also includes the jurisdiction for the ones that are outside, that are under ODOT jurisdiction or county jurisdiction. So I think those are all positive things that have moved forward. We've been able to move forward.
Okay, that's it for engineering then, Brett, right?
Yes.
Okay, so with that, we're on to new business. The first item on the agenda is a review of the 2024 Traffic Safety Commission work plan. Yeah, who put this on here?
I think it just lives on our agenda. It's
Yeah.
not really new business other than it's a new year. Well, because we tabled it last time, right?
Sure, yeah, I think you tabled it last time to kind of look at that, but it's also a matter of this is a new year. This was developed in 2024. It's a potential, if there's an amendment to this necessary, you want to move some things forward. You were talking, when we were talking about the active issues log, the public outreach components, and you listed off the things there. I think all the ones that you listed are ones that we have done in the past and are typically have done. So I think those are able to be, we'll be able to move those forward. If there's other specific ones like that you wanted to move forward with, you could make a motion and create something there as well. It gives you the opportunity to look back, and this is mainly related to what, as we go through the work or the work plan. The first of these, the operational traffic safety components, number one, that's really the things that we're talking about. Staff involvement, we're taking that first pass. We're going to be bringing in the studies. They're going to lead to other things that might lead to either a limited traffic safety decision or a more general traffic decision that would have a public hearing. Then we're getting to this long range planning and some elements there, which has been focused with in the past, basically how that was described is working with the future transportation system plan update. But there's opportunity to look at other things, and just as examples on our website and things that have been created in the past, and mostly staff generated, was the stop sign request policy packet, the marked crosswalk, information on that. Those are all things that could be recommendations from the Traffic Safety Commission to have updates made or other elements to be done with that or advanced in some fashion. It gives you I just wanted to share that this is the opportunity for you to establish the work plan, but then also what are the activities within there. And this work plan can be amended, modified, whatever, by the commission.
I like the work that's being done on the Burchard Fernwood as a kind of a pilot or a template or something to use to look at these issues. And so I think that's a great, and that may lead to additional modifications to the sidewalk plan, stop sign plans, and all kinds of things like that. So it's, but I think it's a great start to how to start resolving some of these issues that have been here. So basically, there hasn't been any plan or anything to deal with these issues, and I appreciate the staff working on that and starting to move forward on issues.
I think the content, which is under letter A here, is really going to be the great majority of our work in the year ahead. And, you know, we could, under active issues log, maybe add an item that says, review site-specific information as it is brought forward, like the Bridger and Fernwood. I kind of feel like that's sort of covered. I don't know if it really needs to edit into the document. Really, the only change that jumps out at me is I don't think item number 2 needs to say the phrase TSC work item number 1 anymore. I think that's a vestige of, it came out of the previous iteration of this, of the work plan for the commission, and now it's clearly number 2. It shouldn't say number 1 anymore. And I don't see us really actively pursuing long-range planning until we hear otherwise from the council. Right? So,
I agree.
but what we can say, you know, whenever called on, it would look like this. So.
I would say, Brett, under engineering, you have the active issues log, but, you know, with Keller being on board, at some point we'll get to solutions and hopefully implementation of those solutions. Maybe something to add to the active issues log would just be resolution of issues, and maybe tell us what the solution was, and we can, you know, close that item out.
Yeah, so as we go through with that active issues log, we go through those items, what I'm anticipating or will be generated is something is warranted to be done, will lead to a limited decision or actually will probably be identified is because there is the provision in the code, there's certain things that the city engineer has the authority to just do under certain circumstances. Others need, it'll be a limited decision where it's more formally documented. Then that'll go into and be presented to the commission as this is what the decision was and this is being moved forward with, and that'll go forward and be implemented. We've had two of those that had gone along. So that's to go in that route. Some of them might lead to where it's something broader. Maybe it involves more than one location and gets into that greater decision that general hearing is needed for the general traffic decision. We'll have a public hearing associated with it. And yet you'll get updated with each of those as they come along. With the log will get updated with information if it's something that's done as a city engineer issue or things like that. Some of the issues I try to make certain that we update the things where there was the one where the curb, I was mentioned earlier, the curb painting had been there, but it just wasn't adequate and maintenance had dealt with it and moved it forward. We'll get that information to the log and I'll try to make certain that I point that out and find a way to make those comments stand out a little broader, that that's something new on that piece of it. So yeah, the intent is you'll be fully informed as things move forward and then we go to knock through these things. Some of these might lead to that there's something that's not warranted to be done and there will be that determination and the documentation for that will be shared as well.
Thank you, Brett. Any comments from anybody else about the work plan? Counselor Carmen, I saw you start to raise your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought we were moving on to the commissioner comments, so I can wait.
So
Yeah, I
just-
guess. My question is, do we make this work plan 2025? And do we eliminate something? Do we eliminate the long range planning or say something else about it? I know Rick said that thought that some of it should be edited.
How about this? I'll move approval of the work plan with the following edits. Change 2024 to 2025. Add in an item under active issues log for a report on resolution of issues. And then the item that says long range planning, cross out TSC work item number 1 and insert if requested by council. Maybe. I move approval of, the last one, it would say long range planning dash if requested by council. Cross out the other words that show currently.
Basically, you're saying we're on hold waiting for direction because we tried once and council didn't want us to proceed. So we're just waiting for further direction.
But we're keeping it here to just as a placeholder to remind ourselves, these are the kind of things we have in mind.
Any discussion on Rick's motion? Russell? Counselor?
Thank you. I know that you want to wait for direction from council, but I think if you guys are having meetings, I know you don't want to just spinning your wheels and not doing work for us to say no. But also, Will has a better idea of, where he can move money. And like, we've already seen some things happen just from the last couple of times you guys have come in and spoke to council. I'd like to see you keep working on long range things in case things can change. But that's just me.
Well, I appreciate that. We can't really do anything without staff resources to support it. And that's the stuck place we find ourselves.
But I thought they were going to be changing some of those things with, Will brought up, he's got the new, they did the LiDAR scan and just different, things that would become available for, them to make decisions that didn't require us bringing in traffic studies and things like that. Which is what the problems were because they were expensive.
I think the changes that are becoming possible all lend themselves toward the operational side of our work plan. And we really need to spend kind of a chunk of money to have most likely Keller go out and take our outline and turn it into a plan. And that's a pretty significant work effort that's, you know, we believe is worth it, but it has to fit within the other priorities of the city, which we are not in charge of. So,
Correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, wasn't part of what we were looking at was, concepts or consideration of ideas for traffic calming within residential developments?
so there was two parts, and I don't know if the council really dove in deep enough to see the nuance between the two parts. One part was responding to requests in existing developed neighborhoods like the ones on the log, where possible remedies or enhancements might be, you know, speed humps or curb extensions or crosswalk treatments or so on that are traffic calming measures. And there would be a policy that says, you know, certain traffic volume thresholds merit this kind of treatment and so on. And you kind of build a matrix of things. And then the other part was incentives to get people to build this stuff into new construction. And I think that got a lot of, from the filtered responses we got back through however many layers before it got to us, those responses that came back to us sounded like they were responding to just that part. We have these concerns about adding more requirements on new development. And there wasn't really response to the other part about having policies and, you know, thresholds for treatments in existing areas like we're talking about on the log. So I think, you know, that work we did is still good anytime it's ready to be moved forward, but I'm not interested in us sending it to council afresh every 6 months. I'm fine with just having them say they're ready for it, because I'm not motivated by the other approach.
So I wonder if we ought to amend your amendment to say something like, if and when supported by council,
I'm fine with that.
maybe not requested by council, but maybe if we know it's going to be supported, because I think that was part of it is, as Rick said, we can't go further without the support, because it's going to lead to a need for resource support. So maybe I'll have you restate that motion.
Well, you're free to make an amendment.
All right, I'll propose an amendment, long range, so part, 2I, long range planning, traffic, TSC work item, number 2, or we scratched number 2?
Just take those words out. I don't think it.
Long range
that-
planning, when supported by council? Is that
Yeah. That's fine.
discussion on that idea, Roger, Michael?
And, okay, I'm gonna make a further amendment to my motion as I pay more attention here. The language that appears under the heading needs some work as well. Take out the whole first line and the word including on the next line. And just start with identifying recommendations for the next transportation system plan update, et cetera. The rest stays.
So the first word would be identify.
Yeah.
So that's the middle of the third sentence. Scratch the first 2.5 sentences.
No, it's the second word in the second
Oh,
line.
second line. Okay.
We're editing from this version of things rather than that version.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm just gonna make a suggestion if I could. Sure.
Please.
With the language that you're looking to propose and make changes here and have the motion, I think the way you're going about it will work fine. I'm gonna suggest maybe come up with the language of what you're looking at. Staff can come back and craft a revised work plan that we could present at the next meeting in July, and then that'll confirm. And then we'll see if we have the language correct, or if there's some minor modifications necessary to make things, if that works for you.
I withdraw my motion and propose a new one, which is that we ask staff to prepare a work plan for our approval at our next meeting based on our discussion here tonight. Is that sufficient for
Yeah.
your needs?
That works.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick. Any discussion?
I second it.
Hearing none, we'll vote on it. Do I hear a second?
I second Rick's motion.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Brett.
Welcome. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is commissioner comments. Before we get to Roger's good news, let's go to Michael. And maybe you mentioned that you attended the council meeting. You want to share with us?
Well, I had not been, when I did that, I had not been briefed on the previous meeting that apparently Derek and Brett had with the city council. But I encourage the council to give input back to our commission, specifically on the traffic calming policy that's been put forward and on other matters, because otherwise we're kind of flying without guidance here. And out of that, it was mentioned first I alluded that it wasn't quite clear what our communications channel was to the city council. At which point, at the end, the mayor said, Brett is to be the communication focal point and represent this commission to city council. And Brett, you weren't there to defend yourself or anything, okay? But I kind of made note of that, because if memory serves, Brett, at the last meeting, you perhaps indicated some hesitancy about creating your own agenda items for city council or something. But the mayor at least indicated that your input directly to them for questions or output from this council is welcome.
Right.
Now, Derek was there. Did you take away anything different than that, Derek?
No, and in fact, I just want to reiterate what I said the last time we had this meeting is I'm happy to be a mouthpiece for this commission and leaning on Brett's expertise, of course, to help get some traction with the rest of the council. So in our meetings, we are moving to a model where we are discussing the different committees and commissions that we are involved with. And so that'll be the time for me to speak up in regard to the concerns that this commission has. And so that's why I've been taking some notes in order to do that.
So if I can just clarify, so
Brett?
as the staff liaison, yes, I'm the person to communicate issues and items brought forward from the Traffic Safety Commission to the City Council. I just need direction from this council or this commission as to what that would be, to know what those agenda items would be and the specifics necessary to bring those forward. Then I can make the request to the city manager and the mayor to get on an agenda.
Counselor Carmen, my apologies. I got out of order here. I'm going to go. You want to give us we'll go to commissioner comments now. Sorry about that.
No, I just wanted to make sure that, again, going forward and reporting to council, that I'm capturing some of your concerns. And one was looking into these fees that we can, are charging construction companies, or maybe that we can, and enforcement and things like that. Is there anything else that I'm missing in regard to that?
No, I think they need to rethink the city's position with these developers coming in. Developers are seeing dollar signs. They know this is a growing area. They want to be in Newburgh. And I know I've went to several meetings in the past when they've been building developments and saying, how come there's no playgrounds? How come there's no place for kids to play, that kind of thing. And And I was told, well, they won't build here if we tell them what to do. Not so. They want to be here. They want to make their millions. They take millions and millions out of the community. When they build houses, right? $500,000, $1 million a piece. That's a lot of money that goes out of the community. They can put something back. And I just don't believe that, some developer's gonna say, oh, well, I just won't come here. Somebody else will. It'll be fine.
So specific to the work of this commission, a great example of that might be designing their streets to make their new neighborhoods even more desirable. Wink, wink. So I have a different commissioner comment, new topic.
Okay.
After the council meeting that I attended back in February, I learned from the city manager that the city has a grant writer. And I was encouraged to offer up ideas of grant funding sources that that person could pursue. And I sent in some ideas and I didn't hear back. Do you know if those got to anybody and if there's any status on that?
I believe so, and I will follow up on that.
Thank you.
I will voice that the grant writer has pursued a number of ODOT voids, or I shouldn't say pursued, looked into a number of ODOT grants. And the ones that I've identified so far, or the majority of them related that would relate to this commission are items related to education and components and some enforcement components, but mostly it's the education and not necessarily the implementation or infrastructure that solve issues. It's more about things covering the public outreach topics you'd indicated and addressing driver behavior. But that's not all of them that are
Yeah.
out there.
I think there was something
But
to
there were some ones that-
potentially support collecting traffic data and storing and organizing counts and collisions. And I think there was some funding possible for real basic building block stuff that help us get going on the giant list.
Yeah, I'll follow up and confirm that, find that email and confirm that.
Thank you.
Counselor, any other comments?
Yes, and then I wrote my notes pretty late, but you had made, a comment that the council's saying no to a lot of things and, can you just restate that so that I can bring that to them?
Of course, the first one is the obvious. We'd recommended that policies need to be put into place or tools for the engineering department, public works to deal with traffic issues, finding ways to evaluate traffic conditions, the traffic calming piece of it, as you talked about, there's two components. And the second being that there should be some look at building safety, building traffic calming into new developments. And again, council said, no, we don't want to provide any more impediments for building. And then the second was, when you look at the deterioration of the streets, we need to maintain our infrastructure, or we're not going to have a city. So.
Yeah, so I would talk about that email that we had that I just recently got from Will. I'm gonna see if maybe he would be willing in all of his busy time to draft up something or reorganize that email that maybe he can send out to this group so you have a better understanding of where the city's at in doing those things. Would that be helpful?
Any other comments? Okay. Now I meant to open it up for like open items. Roger, you want to share your good news?
Also, after the council meeting, February, January, and discussion with Will about grant writing and opportunities, and I looked at, wonder what kind of resources are available within the state. And I found we have a traffic safety committee, state entity that provides advisory to the Department of Transportation and others. And so I started attending their meetings. and found out that there are resources out there. And so that's what I sent, kind of a page or page and a half of here's potential grants that could be applied for. And as Brett, they started looking at it, a lot of it was educational type stuff, but I think there are resources out there. And so I kind of continued to pursue that and found out there was an opening of this Oregon Traffic Safety Committee. And so I applied and I found out today I got appointed. The governor appointed me, so, so I have a 4-year commission now in the Oregon Transportation. And our role is to provide advice to the Department of Transportation on safety issues and programs and things like that, so.
Pedestrian safety, top
Yeah.
priority.
So, yeah.
Tell them to spend all their money in Newburgh.
So anyway, yeah, that effective May 1st, I'll be a member of this 5-member committee, yes,
How often do you meet?
once a month
Once a month? Wow.
In Salem.
in Salem. Also, you can attend by Zoom, but
Go to Counselor.
Well, that's wonderful news. Thank you very much for your continued service to the city and the state. With that being said, maybe you can bring up to them how we'd like to streamline some processes when you're working with, other jurisdictions. For example, the city wants to replace the signs on 99. And there's been, small little roadblocks, little emails that Will is jumping through various hoops to just, we want to pay for them as part of the revamping up downtown, making downtown look a little nicer, but, it's just, it's stalling. And so it'd be nice if the state, realizing that another entity wants to pay for these things, that they streamline that process. Maybe they make the signs and deliver them and we'll pay, or, they've made it just complicated.
I think that's the whole concern with me was the Department of Transportation puts up all these barriers for communication or projects and things. And as tomorrow, we're gonna go look at some potential solutions on the Bruce issue. One of the things that came up was, well, with the new ADA laws, sidewalks have to be installed and curb cuts and all this stuff. And this is kind of a rural area. There aren't sidewalks, there aren't curbs, that kind of stuff. And so how do you deal with that? And a project that probably could be put in for $10,000, $20,000 is now ballooned to well over $100,000 to deal with potential ADA issues that really don't exist, so.
So were you aware the state is coming into downtown Newburgh to improve the ADA ramps? Okay. To the other point about, our city manager and that, would it be advisable for him to contact Will and tell him he's on the commission and so he can, provide a more direct link concerning this signage issue direct? When I heard Will's story about that, that was maddening just to hear his story about how we can't spend our own money to improve.
I think it certainly couldn't, hurt to let him know, but
That's already occurred. I sent an email to Will, the mayor, Brett, the chairman, so, yeah.
Thank you for your service, Roger. Any other comments? Okay. Hearing none, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.